huge fan, obviously, growing up. You know, everyone grew up with Sabbath, and you know, you guys spawned a music genre along with Priest. You know, Priest came along a little bit after, and which then spawned in turn millions of other genres from that. You know what I mean? And I've always wondered where you came from. What was being spawned that you latched onto to then take it on in that kind of metal family tree?
Well, it's quite different where I come from. I come from my sort of music was the Shadows, so it was all instrumental really. Because in them days there was it was rock and roll, and I wanted something I could get that I could play guitar to, and so the Shadows were probably the only instrumental band around then that were a good band, and to copy really, because you can learn the songs and whatever else, the tunes. So that's sort of where I started from, and then I got into more jazzy things as the time went on, and blues. But it was the Shadows and Cliff really that started it all, because that's the sort of thing I was playing, and that's the sort of thing was popular at the time.
Brilliant. We actually, me and Glenn watched a Shadows concert, like a recent one.
Yeah.
And it's not easy stuff. You know, there's a lot that goes into that, the clarity of the notes.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot involved, you know.
Really a clean, crisp. He had a unique sort of sound, didn't he? How he done it with the AC30 and whatever else.
So when did you like go from that, you know, in between that sound and the Sabbath sound and your sound? What was the sort of journey? How did you kind of find your own voice and develop that?
After the Shadow sort of thing, I got in a band with Bill Ward, and we moved up to Carlisle, and we joined a band up there called Mythology, and it was the bass player from, I don't know if you remember, Peter and Gordon, years ago. Anyway, we formed this band with them and moved up there, and we were playing sort of bluesy sort of things, and then you had to play pop stuff because that's what they wanted, but we throw these odd sort of John Mayall type things in, you know.
Gotcha.
And we really liked doing that sort of music, and it sort of got a grip, and I think as things materialised, you obviously know about my chopping the fingers off. After that, I got into to having to play a different style and trying to learn the guitar again in a different way, and using thimbles and all the rest of the stuff, and trying to make the sound as big as I could for what we got, because we were like a guitar, bass and drums basically, and then of course Ozzy. So it sort of come from that really, trying to make the sound as big as I could. But you had basic equipment then, you had no overdrive amps and stuff, they were just like an amp. So you had to make your sound, you had to sort of come up with an idea to overload the input to make it sort of distort. And this bloke came up to me when we lived in Carlisle and said, I had this treble booster, and he said, I can make that sound better for you if you like. I went, oh, okay. And he said, can I take it with me tonight and I'll bring it back tomorrow? I don't know why I trusted him. I don't know what brought that on, but anyway, he was from a band up there that became Spooky Tooth.
Oh, right, okay.
They were called the VIPs then, and they was the same band, but they had a different name. So he took it away and brought it back the next day, and I started playing with it. I thought, bloody hell, this is great. It got, you know, got nice distortion and whatever. It basically went from there, trying to make the sound bigger and make it fuller, and then I'm working with Geezer to make the sound bigger, because he'd bend the strings a bit and make it wide, you know. And I'd play more sort of open notes to let the E string ring as I'm playing something, just to try and widen the sound. And it sort of materialised into what we did.
So it sounded like a conscious thing to make something that was overdriven and heavy and big, and also sounds like a combination of that and the amps at the time and what was available at the time, kind of going hand in hand to create something new. But it was a conscious thing from you guys to make something different.
Well, it was. I mean, we liked the idea of doing the blues things, and that sort of just went from that into this sort of more being able to write our own stuff. And as soon as we started writing our own stuff, then the sound developed more, because we were writing for those particular songs that we were doing. You know, Wicked World and Black Sabbath were the first songs we'd ever done. But that was the benchmark of where we were going to go. So
Gotcha.
once we'd done those, that was it. It was off into its own little world, you know.
And from a guitar player point of view, how important was it for you to develop your own voice as well as the band voice? Because I mean, if you created something that unique at that time, I guess some people would say, well, this is what we're doing, we're sticking with it. But there seemed to be like a drive to keep within that framework, but do something different and evolve, you know. So how important is it for you as a guitar player back then and now to push and challenge your own?
Always was, and it was always I always found a challenge, and I liked that because it does drive you on, you know. The challenge for me at first was me fingers, and then the next thing was to break through with what we got, because at the time, the sort of music we were playing wasn't accepted at all. It was all like soul and everything, you know.
Right.
So there was very few places you could play at. And we played at a few blues clubs, and we'd play the blues. Then we'd throw these two new songs in, Black Sabbath and Wicked World, and people would come on, oh, what's that song, you know? They liked it, and we knew that we were onto something, but then we had to convince the rest of the world, which was pretty
and
tough.
You did, though.
Yeah, eventually, yeah, but it was tough because there was no TVs, no, you know, the internet, you didn't have all that sort of stuff. So it was word of mouth, really, and actually getting out there playing and trying to prove it. But the drive has always been in me to sort of improve things and try and push it one step further. Whether it did or not, I don't know, but that was always there.
Gotcha. And you know, obviously being in Priest and being closely related, you know, with Sabbath,
yeah.
There was definitely something going on in the Midlands with you guys. And you think you know what that is? I mean, Rob said that he thinks it might have had something to do with the steelworks,
yeah.
You know, that hammering.
I think so. I think it's very the factory side of it, because I mean, I worked in a factory, as a lot of people did then. I think that the depression of the Midlands and how grim it was, and you know, there was some, where we lived anyway, wasn't exactly a nice area, so it was all like gangs and God knows what else. And I think it all has an impression on what you're writing and the music and the lyrics, and so I think that had a big part towards it, yeah.
Maybe from the drive point of view as well. I know Glenn says that he worked in the factories as well, and he was saying that kind of environment made him feel driven to get out of it, to do something better. You know?
Absolutely. You know, working in a factory, I could never see myself keep doing that, and always wanted to get out. And my get out was the day I'd done this. I was joining a band to go to Germany, and I'll give my notice in.
Oh wow!
And I had to work the last day. And that's when it happened.
Isn't that funny how that happens? You know?
It's really weird how it all happened, because it sort of threw them my whole life around, you know. Apart from not having a job, I didn't have a band or anything then, so I had to really go back to the drawing board and start again. If I'd have known what I know now, I'd have tried to play the other way.
Right.
Because I'd already been playing a couple of years, so it seemed a long time then.
Yeah.
You know, when you're 19, it's you know, 2 years of your life, I think, oh, that's a long time. But now, of course, it don't. And
you've always been synonymous with the SG, or SG-style guitars, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, am I right in thinking the first SG was a backup for another guitar, wasn't it, originally?
First SG, yeah, because I used to have the Strat, and again, I worked on it myself to try and get it right for me to play, because I couldn't just pick up a guitar like you'd be able to pick up and play, and I couldn't use heavy strings anymore. I just had to change everything, change the fretting and have the frets lower and strings lower, because I was using thimbles, you know. I couldn't, you just can't feel what you're touching. So the Strat was the one I had, but I did have a backup guitar, which was the SG. I had a right-handed SG upside down. I used to tune, you know, got it strung the other way around. We used to get all the knob marks on your arm, and you know. And I heard of this bloke who he'd got a left-handed guitar and he was right-handed, and he played that upside down. It's really peculiar. So I got in touch with him and I arranged to meet him in a car park. It was a bit dodgy, really.
I was going to say, it sounded like a dodgy deal. Totally.
Yeah, he might have nicked it, I don't know. But anyway, I did, and...
so you swapped them?
And we swapped.
That's hilarious.
He wanted some cash with it. I said, no, I'm not going to have cash. He went, all right then. So we swapped. And then he had the right-handed, I had the left-handed, and that was it. So I had that probably as a second guitar, if anything, you know. So I'd used the Strat, and when we went in to do the first album, I recorded Wicked World with the Strat. And then the pickup went in the session. I thought, oh no. And so I ended up, I thought I've got to use the other guitar. So I used that. It was the first time I'd ever really played it. I hadn't played it. And I thought, here I am doing an album, a guitar I'd never played before, really, live. Once we'd done that, I never went back. I stuck with the, the SG ever since then.
What was it that made you stick to it? Like, instead of going back to the other one, what was it,
Well, the other one, as far as I know, was buggered, because in them days, you couldn't just go and buy a pickup. It was like, oh. And if I'd have really thought about it, I could have took the front pickup out and put it, but I never thought of that.
Gotcha, yeah.
No, as soon as I started using the SG, and then that was on the album, that's it. And,
I hear
you. And I actually swapped my Strat for a sax.
Oh, really?
I had this mad idea of trying to play the sax, which I drove everybody up the wall with. And then eventually I got rid of it. But and then
Black Sabbath?
Yeah, Black Sabbath. And Geezer saw the Strat in a pawn shop. And he said, and he was planning on going to buy it for me on the afternoon, buy it back, but somebody bought it and
wow.
he'd gone. But yeah, but I've always stuck with the SG since then.
Brilliant. I remember you guys were playing, I think it was, you'd done the whole, obviously the Sabbath career, and then when you guys got together with Ronnie again for the Heaven and Hell thing.
Yeah.
We were out in a band I was with before Priest. And, all the bands usually are backstage doing their thing, and Heaven and Hell were there. And all of a sudden, everyone cleared out of the backstage, and it was like a mass exodus. Everyone moved out to the fields to watch you guys. And it was just all the, whatever interviews anyone had, whatever thing anyone was doing, they dropped it to go and see you guys. And it was like Mecca, you know what I mean? Because no one had ever seen it.
Sure they didn't get out. Didn't run out. Sure they weren't going home.
No, it was just amazing to see everyone that was in the industry, in some capacity, go out and watch you guys do what you did. And I remember you had the white SG. I don't know if it was the SG actually, it might have been it was an SG, I think.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those, I mean, you're all iconic anyway, iconic music and iconic people. And it was just one of those things that I think everyone growing up with, see you, it's like Blackmore with a Strat, or, Hendrix or yourself. It's just that kind of image that goes along with the music and the sound. That must be an incredible feeling to have created something that, well, iconic, really. There's no other word for it, And, the SG now, I mean, you are a part of the SG, you know what I mean? And the SG is part of you, and that will continue on. It's like Priest, they're always talking about the legacy and what they leave behind. And that's kind of what, the music and the guitars and the moments that you gave everyone, And at the time, you were creating music and you were, that's what you were doing, but it kind of changed the world, you know what I mean? And I can only thank you for that. I know everyone else would as well. Yeah. And that's partly the reason why I'm here. My dad, he put on, I think it was, what was it? I think it was Masters of Reality. And it was a combination of Sabbath, and he showed me Hendrix and Blackmore, and everyone's the same. You hear that stuff for the first time, it changes your world.
Yeah.
And when people say, what's the reason you play guitar? It's you, it's Blackmore, it's Hendrix, it's all those guys, and it's, what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. As I say, it's the same as me going when I say the Shadows and stuff. Shadows is nothing like, but it's something that you start off with that starts you off liking the guitar, to play the guitar.
And it's funny, when you're that young, and the same, if you're that young, you don't quite know what it is. It's something that's, you don't know what a guitar is, you don't know what a band is. There's something in it that trips a switch in you somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's an incredible thing.
Well, I used to have, when I was young, I used to have these dreams of being on stage. I mean, I never played then, this was well before, but I used to do contact sports, boxing and, karate and stuff like that. I used to have these images of being on stage thinking it would be that.
Right.
And it's really weird because once I took up music, all that went aside. And I used to go there, 5 times a week, and then it went down to 4 and then 2.
Right.
And then I stopped and the music took over. Right. And then eventually when we're on stage, I saw this thing that I was seeing in my dream where we're on stage, like, you'd be on stage and bloody hell, this is that dream I've been having. Ever so peculiar.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, I actually spoke to Rob the other day, and I said, I'm seeing Tony in a couple of days. I'm super excited. I said, do you want to ask him anything? And I thought he'd ask about something like an old memory you guys had, because was it, I can't remember what year it was when he'd done 2 shows with you guys.
Yeah, he did the show when Ozzy was supposedly retiring, and we done a couple of nights, and Rob sang with. Well, actually, he sang with us as well. Another time he has done 2 separate things with us.
There's some footage out there online, and apparently you told him like quite near to the gig, because it was something that happened quite near to the gig, and he somehow pulled it together, you know.
Well, what happened was the tour manager come to me and he said, "Well, we've got a bit of a problem." Well, go on, what is it? Ozzy, he can't do the show tonight, and we're, you know, the people were already in, and what do you think about Rob singing the set? I said, "Well, if you asked Rob." They went, "No, but we thought we'd ask you first." I went, "Well, it's great if, you know, but as long as somebody goes out and tells them that Ozzy's not going to be there, because it's not fair on Rob, you know." And that's sort of how that started, and he'd done a great job. I mean, he did. He was really good.
Good stuff. Well, he asked me to ask you, and I was surprised by this, because again, I thought he'd ask you something based on, you know, the history or something, a story that you'd have, you know, that would remind you about. But he asked me about how many times have you changed guitar gauge on the strings, gauges throughout your career, which is, I don't know if Rob's getting into guitar, and it's kind of...
So you're a secret guitar player?
I better watch myself, you know, Rob shows up singing and playing guitar, I'm finished. But no, he said, have you changed guitar gauges through your career, or is it, you know, because of the tuning thing?
When after I had my accident and making my own sets up, because you couldn't buy light gauge strings then, and I couldn't play the heavy, you know, I still can't bend the strings, they hurt. So I came up with making a light set of strings using banjo strings as the firsts, and then dropping them down. So I'd end up with the 5th string, it'd be a 6th. And made up a light gauge set, and then approaching different companies who said, I've gone mad, you know, that will never work. And I said, "It does work, I use it." No, we're not interested. And they wouldn't be interested. Then eventually one company in Wales said, "Piccato, we'll do them. We'll make a light gauge set for you, make your own sets." And then, of course, they did, and they worked. And then a while afterwards, everybody started making bloody light gauge strings. So that was the first initial one. And I did use heavier ones depending on what songs we put in the set. Because if it was tuned down, I might have used a heavier set then on the tune down. But it would still have to be flexible enough for me to be able to bend them, because, you know, it weren't like before.
Right.
Before I could do it, and then I can't, if you know what I mean. You can't, it's hard to bend them, and you have to be careful with the tips, because it'll damage and rip them off if they're too heavy.
It always amazes me, you know, you're saying stuff wasn't available, like you couldn't grab a pickup for a guitar, or, you know, or the strings weren't available. So there was, you know, with amps and guitars, there weren't that many options, but all you guys sounded different. Whereas today, there's so many different options with amps, guitars, and pickups, but everyone sounds
endless now.
Very similar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, in them days, you had to make your sound, because there weren't the gadgets. It was a basic amp, and even down for me, guitars. I couldn't get guitars. Left-handed guitars were like a rarity, certainly in England. And to find a left-handed Fender or Gibson was really difficult. And same with amps. You had Marshall, who had been around for a long time, and then there weren't a lot to choose from. No. But it was still the basic amp. There was no kind of preamps or anything. You didn't have, the only pedals that existed was probably a wah-wah, and then of course things started more and more coming out, choruses and phases, and it went mad. But yeah, you had to make your own sound then.
There's something to be said for that, I think. You know, from that almost like a limitation, that's where you find your strength, and you create something new. Where if everything's readily available, it doesn't seem to be that same sort of experimentation and drive to get your own thing out of it, you know.
No, because everybody else they've got all these companies now that's coming up with all the things for you, and they go, this is the new one, and this is new, and that's new. So you don't have to invent your own thing. Where do you go with it? I remember when with Laney's, went to Laney Amps, and then I told you about I had this treble booster that I had, I went to Laney's and said, you know, can we build something like this in the amp? Well, what do you want to do that for? I said, well, so it'll distort. Well, you don't want it distorted, you want a clean sound. I said, no, I want it distorted. I went, oh, no, that's not going to sell. So it went on for, I don't know, a year or so. And then a couple of years, and they came to me and said, no, that idea of building it, and they did, and they eventually built it. But, you know, it was hard going because you had to prove it and prove it and prove it before anybody sort of get a grip and say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Well,
It's that pioneering spirit, isn't it? Really, it's like Eddie Van Halen when he put the humbucker in the single coil.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't giving him what he'd like the Strat, but he wanted the, you know, and didn't make it, so he stuck it in there himself. And that, you know, I guess some people would say, oh, they don't do it, so I won't. You know, that's where it ends.
That's right.
And other people say, well, they don't do it, so I'm going to make my own thing. And then, as you said, later on down the road, that becomes the standard for everything else.
Absolutely. So that's the thing with Eddie as well. He was innovative. Some of the stuff he's come up with. And always remember, because they toured with us for 8 months when they first started. It was really different, you know. I'd hear him, blimey, he's bloody good, you know. And he developed a technique and went on and on and on with it, doing the way he does it. And he was always fiddling about with his guitar and changing this and changing that. And he still does, you know, he still does come up with ideas for the guitar like that. And yeah, I mean, you need people like that. But as I say, also, then you've got the companies that's got the money and then put in and to develop just stuff to put out to sell, really. How
was it also with Eddie and that kind of next generation? I mean, you guys, you know, had been out kind of about 10 years, you know, prior to, you know, in the Metallicas of the world. And when that kind of, I mean, it's strikingly obvious, you know, your influence on part of the Metallica sound. So when that kind of new wave of heavy metal, not new wave of heavy metal, but, you know, that new wave of heavy music came about, did you guys think, oh, bloody hell, we better get on this sort of train? Or did you guys say, we hear the influence, we're sticking true to what we are because that's where we came from?
No, I've always believed in sticking to what we do and what we know about what we to follow that track. Because if you start coming off that and going, oh, we'll start doing what they're doing there, because that's what happened. I noticed that particularly in the 80s, and I was living over here then. I always remember when you got what sort of like with the hair bands and all that stuff, and then that sort of music come out, Poison and all those sort of bands, and there was a gotload of them, you know, so many all sounding the same. And I think, blimey, what's happened here? It just went, because everybody's like it became more of a posing thing than the actual music, you know. And so I saw it go off track then, which, you know, wasn't, well, I can't say it's bad, but they'd done their own thing, and, which was great. But there was the glut of these bands suddenly come up overnight. And then when that starts phasing out, certain bands would move on to someone else. Which I could never see that. I believe in following what you believe in and sticking to that, you know. If you like it, that's it. And then if you can influence other people to like it. And I've always had that thing in me where, you know, we've got to like it first. And then if people like it, great. And the people that don't listen to it.
And like listening to stuff, you just, I mean, I think Michael Schenker said once he creates more than he consumes. So he doesn't listen to a lot of stuff. When, you know, I don't know if I was going to ask you if you listen to stuff or...
I try not to listen to too much because I can end up playing a riff and go, oh, no.
Yeah.
And that's somebody else's, you know. I really get conscious of that. And when I start putting ideas down, I was saying earlier, I've got hundreds of riffs or thousands of riffs. And I don't even know what they are because I put them down and then go away and come back and put someone else down. And then when I do listen to them, I'll eventually listen to them and probably go, oh, that's crap. But you know,
throw them my way. If you think they're crap, I'll take them if you want. What's your favourite one you've ever created? What's your favourite riff?
Favourite riff?
Or favourite three?
God, I don't know. Because I think every one you do when you're doing them is you think, sure, I like this, or I Am Man, or I liked, you know, sort of Black Sabbath was the first one we done, and that was different. And then I liked Iron Man, and we went to that other phase into Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, which was a different one again. Started taking a slightly different route. Up until when we had Ronnie, then that took a completely different route with Evan and Hal and the way we were writing then, because Ronnie, as opposed to singing on riffs, would sing on chords really, and we sort of tried to get him into both, so he'd sing on the riffs as well, and it worked, you know. Because when he first came in, we done this song called Die Young. It's steaming away, and then suddenly it comes to this quiet, cuts in half into a quiet bit, and Ronnie goes, "Oh, you can't do that." I said, "Well, you can. We've been doing it for years. This is what we do. We change tempo drastically like that, and then go back into someone else." Because he didn't know he hadn't done that, and then he realised it does work, and then he got into that vein, and then we started writing, you know, differently with him. So the difference from Ozzy to Ronnie was where Ozzy'd sing on Might Follow the Riff, like in Iron Man, which would work, you know. Ronnie would do it another way and sing in the... I don't know why I said all that, really. But.
Well, no, totally. I mean, so you would influence him and show him a different way. Yeah. And did he influence you as well?
Absolutely.
The other way around?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Is there something you've always wanted to do musically, on the guitar or otherwise, and have never done that you'd like to do in the future?
I've got a thing about playing with some of the heavy riffs using string sections and stuff like that, which we have done, I suppose, in some of the stuff. But I sort of like that, trying to create that vibe of like really evil, really sort of the things you can get from string sections that you can't get from the guitar, really. And a combination of doing that.
Would you ever do like a soundtrack or anything like that, like a big evil, you know, orchestrated sort of soundtrack at a your style?
Have I done one?
No, would you?
Oh,
like for a film score or something like that?
That's what I'd like to sort of do. I've done a couple of things for soundtracks, but I'd like to do that. I'd like to make something a bit more sort of really, you know, powerful, like more or less like when we first started Sabbath. The idea was, because Geezer and myself used to go and watch the midnight movie, you know, the horror movies and all that sort of stuff. And that's sort of what started it. Wanted to create that vibe within music, that you get that, wow, you know. I mean, you look at it now and it's crap when you watch one of the old films, but then it was like, oh God, you know. Yeah. And so the idea was to try and create that in music, and that's, I'd like to do that on another step, whatever that is.
That'd be great. Like if you're looking for inspiration, you maybe wouldn't go to like a heavy metal song. Would you get inspiration from something like that more than something?
Yeah, I think more so when I used to listen to, I made a point of putting on some certain classical things, just to get my head around the way that they express stuff and the drama in it and stuff like that. And that was a link to try and to do it with the guitar, you know, to try and get some kind of atmosphere going in it. Hence the Black Sabbath one, and dropping down to the quiet bit and then building up to the loud bit at the end, was to try and get those dramatic parts going on in it, you know, and various other songs we've done to try and give it some kind of movement. So yeah.
We did a show on the Redeemer of Souls tour, and we drove up, I can't remember where it was, but we drove up to the venue, and there were the people outside with the picket, you know, with the signs and everything like that.
Yes.
And you know, I remember it from videos back in the day, you know, in the 80s, where that was going on as well, and it was the first time I'd experienced it. And I'd imagine that you and Sabbath had experienced all that sort of thing as well.
Really did, because when we'd done the first album, you can imagine
the
kind of worms that opened, you know, people, especially the church, really had to go at us and claim we were satanic, and then they got the evangelists over here going, this, holding up the album, this band, you know.
Well, you're not.
No. And so yeah, we had all that, and we used to have everybody outside with the banners and stuff, you know, which was a bit frightening really in the early days, because you don't know, you know, you get some nut to come up and shoot you, and you just didn't know. I remember one time in Germany, actually, we were supposed to be playing a show in this town, and the church complained about it that much, it become headlines and big petitions come up. Anyway, they banned the show, so they cancelled the show. and the next day the church burned down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was such a weird thing.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, I dare say we got the blame, but you know, it's funny what sort of things do happen, and
you guys have always been slightly linked to that side of things, like the occult with the lyrics and everything, and those coincidences that happen, like the church burning down the day after.
Yeah, well, we had an interest, certainly Geezer and myself had an interest in you know, out-of-body experiences and Satanism and stuff like that. We had as an interest, not to practice it, but
I'm a bit uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah. I'm going to change her in a minute. And so, and this thing built up through reputation, people thinking that you're more and more, and also at one point we were stopped doing interviews by the management we had at that time. Stopped us doing interviews because we weren't. It was worse doing interviews than not. You know, the amount of write-ups we were getting were really bad. So we stopped doing them, which caused again more. Thing, oh, there's something wrong with these guys. You can't get to see them and all that business. So it caused more of this built up of us being satanic, and that went on for quite a while, you know. And we had all sorts of strange things happening, witches coming to the shows, or so-called witches. And one particular time we went back to the hotel after the gig, and we went up to our floor. There was all these people along the floor in black cloaks with the candles, chanting like this. And as we go, oh Christ. So we climbed over them and got into each individual rooms, you know, and they're still going outside. We went, what are we going to do with this lot outside? And so we found each other and said, okay, what we'll do, we'll go out and all go out at the same time, blow the candles out and sing happy birthday to them, which really pissed them off.
That's
but
what
they
you did.
left. So, you know, funny things like that really, which can be funny, but could also be dangerous as well, because you don't know what, you know, what you're letting yourself in for, really.
I mean, you know, these days, you know, the image and the, you know, the branding of a band is really important as well. But back then, it wasn't something you guys were doing. But I suppose in the long run, in the bigger picture, it probably worked for you. It, you know, gave you a sort of a mysterious.
Mystique, it did, absolutely. But we were also talking earlier about sort of the early albums. Like after the Black Sabbath album, we had Paranoid. Now, the album cover on Paranoid, it's nothing to do with Paranoid. It was going to be called War Pigs. So it had the bloke with the shield, which remotely made sense on it, more so than Paranoid. But they banned they couldn't use that as a title in them days, because, I mean, imagine that happening now with the way people are, bands are. But it was so awkward for us to sort of move forward with things, because you'd either get, we're not playing you, or you can't, or you're not playing in this city, or whatever else, you know. But of course, it's different now. But then it was tough. You had to break those barriers.
Yeah, I guess being so unique at that time, you broke through. You broke through it all in the end.
Eventually we did. But I say it was tough. But that's back to again believing in what you do, and just sticking with it. And I've always, if anybody always says, "Have you got any advice?" That's always what my advice is believe in what you do and enjoy what you do and believe in it, and don't get persuaded to do something else if that's what you believe in, and just take that path. And you know, since so many people over the years jump off and start doing something else, and then when it's something else, they jump onto that, and it's like, oh no, you can't be believing in. They're just trying to get on and make some money or whatever it might be. I don't know.
I suppose it's easy to chase your tail if you're always chasing what the next thing is, and it's not you. Yeah. You're always going to be chasing something, chasing a trend, or you know. So Tony, thanks again for giving us the opportunity, giving me the opportunity to get some insight into where you come from as a player and as an icon. And yeah, I'd just like to say thanks again. And, you know, thanks to everyone for tuning in, and hopefully you've all learned something from the great man. And yeah, we'll be seeing you soon. Thanks, mate.